Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our January 15th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today we're featuring a young Southern Iowa entrepreneur who has earned national attention by creating a multifunctional, ultra-high pressure fire suppression unit that's designed for farmers to use. We're also previewing Iowa Farm Bureau's priorities for the 2024 Iowa legislative session with State Policy Advisor Kevin Keel. Let's start with Kevin, who sat down with Spokesman editor Tom Block earlier this month to discuss the issues that Farm Bureau members will be bringing to the State House in 2024.
We're visiting today with Kevin Keel, Iowa Farm Bureau State Policy Advisor, to talk about some of the key issues affecting agriculture during the 2024 Iowa legislative session, which began January 8th. Kevin, tax reform continues to be a focus in Iowa. What are some of Farm Bureau's key priorities regarding the tax discussions that will be taking place at the Capitol this year?
Well, thanks a lot, Tom, for having me here today to talk about the upcoming session. And you're right. It's clear that the legislature will be embarking on tax reform again this upcoming legislative session. And Farm Bureau members are well prepared to engage with legislators to talk about agriculture's priorities for the tax reform discussion that's going to be coming up. So when we look at some of the goals that agriculture has regarding tax reform, it's really important that the legislature focus on passing policies that are beneficial to agriculture. And the legislature should be applauded for their recent successes on tax reform, including property tax reform. We really stand ready to continue those efforts to provide additional property tax relief for Iowans. The state should also continue to make investments that provide property tax relief on an annual basis, and that's through the property tax credits that the state funds annually. Those would include the homestead property tax credit and the ag land and family farm tax credits. Those tax credits that are funded on an annual basis ultimately reduce the property tax burden for Iowans. And so we ask the legislature continue to do that good work and to continue to fund those property tax credits, which provides dollar for dollar property tax relief. Along with that, as the state looks to fund education, K through 12 education, we want to make sure that that funding does not rest solely on the backs of property taxpayers. The legislature provides funding to education on an annual basis in a way that doesn't overly increase the burden on property taxes, and we want to see that continue. A new policy that Farm Bureau members set this past September was regarding the capital gains deduction for the sale of breeding livestock in the state. That tax provision is set to expire in the tax year 2023. So Iowans, for the first time in decades, are going to be paying tax on these types of livestock sales. So Farm Bureau members proactively stated that this deduction should continue, and we'll be working with the legislature to ensure that that tax provision continues. We know that livestock production is vital to rural economies. It's a great opportunity for beginning farmers to make it back to the farm, to start up their operations. So the tax code should be incentivizing livestock production, not creating a disincentive. So we're going to work with the legislature to see about getting that provision extended into the future.
How do these tax reforms that are being discussed fit into the overall picture of the state budget?
Well, Farm Bureau's goal for any budgeting year is to ensure that the legislature funds their obligations and does not pass the burden on to property taxpayers. So we have a strong budget right now, the state of Iowa does. We've got revenues exceeding expenditures, but we want to make sure that the state is not shifting any burdens onto property taxpayers. While local governments set the levy rates for property taxes, there are a lot of decisions the legislature makes every single year that have a huge impact on property taxes. So while we're in a good fiscal situation in the state, we want to make sure that wise decisions are made that protect property taxpayers as they set their budget and while they embark on tax reform in the state.
Changing gears onto another topic, with several large infrastructure projects involving transmission lines and pipelines under consideration in Iowa, Farm Bureau members have expressed the need for greater landowner protections. What measures is Farm Bureau seeking to protect farmers and landowners who are affected by these kind of projects?
Farm Bureau members believe that large infrastructure projects and property rights can coexist. So as Farm Bureau members look at these large projects that are coming online, whether it's a pipeline or large transmission lines, they're seeking additional protections prior to those projects being approved and after they're approved, when construction is going on and when farmers are dealing with any damages that are persistent on that land that was affected by construction. So looking at those two different buckets, Farm Bureau members set policies stating that 90% of voluntary easements should be achieved before a project is granted eminent domain authority. And then additionally, after the project has been approved, Farm Bureau members want to ensure that payments are being made if there's persistent crop damages in that area of the easement. And then ultimately, while the construction is going on as well, making sure that farmers have the ability to file complaints directly to the Iowa Utilities Board if there are land restoration standards that are not being followed. So Farm Bureau members want to work with the legislature this upcoming session to try to implement these policies to provide protections for farmers as these infrastructure projects are going through the approval process and after they're built, to ensure that farmers are made whole for any damages on the land and that their land is restored to the best of its ability.
And that was an issue that we did a lot of strong work on last year, so continuing to carry that same strong message.
Well, that's right, Tom. Last year, the House should be applauded for their efforts in passing a bill that included these Farm Bureau priorities, all three of these Farm Bureau priorities. We're going to continue to work with all legislators to try to build consensus on these issues and get these issues across the finish line this upcoming legislative session.
Another focus for Farm Bureau this year will be modernizing the Grain Indemnity Fund, which protects farmers who haven't received payment for grain in the event of a grain elevator failure. Why does the fund need to be brought up to date, and what steps does Farm Bureau support to ensure farmers are adequately protected?
You know, it's interesting, Tom. There's many farmers today who aren't familiar with the fund and have never paid the assessment. The last time the assessment ran was in 1989. So seeing that the assessment has again been triggered this past September, prior to that, our members engaged in a thorough evaluation and discussion about the Grain Indemnity Fund, how it works, how it operates, what are the pros, what are the cons. What they found is that the fund is the best form of protection for farmers in the case of a grain elevator failure, and it's the cheapest form of protection. In fact, there are other states in the Midwest region that are trying to set up their own indemnity fund right now because they lack one. So Farm Bureau members looking at it through that lens set two policy goals for changes to modernize the Grain Indemnity Fund. The first goal is to increase the size of the fund and increase the per farmer claim cap to better reflect modern grain prices. So right now, the Grain Indemnity Fund has an $8 million assessment ceiling and a $3 million assessment floor. Farmers would like to see those limits increased to better reflect modern grain production levels, better reflect modern grain prices, to provide better protection for farmers, ensure those claims are being paid out in a timely fashion. Amongst all the states that do have an indemnity fund, Iowa's fund level is the smallest of all those states. So we see that there is a need to update that fund size. The second policy that Farm Bureau members set on this issue is to extend this protection and the per bushel assessment to credit sale contracts, which are not included by the Grain Indemnity Fund. We know that credit sale contracts which can include a deferred payment or a price later contract, are very common marketing tools for farmers, very common financial planning tools. In fact, most recent data shows that about 40% of commercial transactions were credit sale contracts. And right now, those types of contracts are not provided any protection in the case of a grain elevator failure. Iowa is the only state with an indemnity fund that does not cover credit sale contracts, and Iowa farmers would like to see that these types of transactions are covered by the Grain Indemnity Fund. If the worst thing happens through no fault of their own, there is a grain elevator failure. If you think about the types of farmers that would be in a pinch if there were a grain elevator failure, you look at your beginning farmer or a farmer that's just starting out. They may not have on-farm storage. They're delivering grain straight from the field, straight to the elevator. They may be utilizing that deferred payment option for financial planning purposes. They may be using a price later contract to be able to utilize a better spring price. Those farmers are really going to be in a lot of hurt if that elevator fails and they're provided no protection from the Grain Indemnity Fund. Ultimately, this fund is farmer funded to create farmer protection. 95% of the balance of the fund is going to be collected from the per bushel assessment on farmers. And so farmers are the ones that would like to see the credit sale contracts covered by the fund, and we're going to work really hard with the legislature to make those changes to modernize the Grain Indemnity Fund so that it is an effective tool for farmers across the state.
Well, Kevin, those are three big issues that'll be going on, but are there other issues that Farm Bureau will be monitoring during the 2024 session?
Absolutely, Tom. Those are the three priorities that we're prepping Farm Bureau members to discuss with legislators this upcoming session. And we're going to have great conversations on those issues. But Farm Bureau every year engages on dozens of different bills that are brought from the legislature. Ultimately, all of our efforts during the legislative session are dictated by that policy book that's set through our grassroots policy development process. Farm Bureau has an unparalleled process of developing policy. And so, when Farm Bureau takes a stance on an issue, that it's coming directly from the grassroots. It's coming from farmers. These are the things that farmers want to see. These are policies that farmers have developed and ultimately want to see enacted in the state legislature.
And as we wrap up, you talk about that grassroots process, and it's really a year-round effort. Why is it important for Farm Bureau members to engage with their legislators both during the legislative session and throughout the year?
Each year, the legislature makes decisions that are going to have a big impact on farmers, on their families, on their communities, on rural Iowa. And it's really critical that farmers' voices are heard in the process. If farmers aren't speaking on behalf of their own interests, then agriculture's voice won't be heard at the Capitol. And so the grassroots process that Farm Bureau puts together of engaging with legislators prior to session, during the session, engaging in our Farm Bureau days at the Capitol, it's really critical that legislators hear from real people who are impacted by the decisions that they make. Farm Bureau does it better than anybody else. Farm Bureau members work hard to engage with their legislators, to build relationships, and ultimately advocate for things that are great for Iowa, for agriculture, for rural Iowa and their communities. So I'm really looking forward to another successful legislative session, and Farm Bureau members will ensure that agriculture's voice is heard in the Capitol.
Thanks, Kevin. The state legislative session is always a marathon, but as you just heard Kevin say, Farm Bureau members are ready to run. No one does it better, and we are thankful for the Iowa Farm Bureau members who will be sharing agriculture's story with state lawmakers this year. Next up is Mark Mendick, a young engineer and volunteer firefighter from Moulton, which is an Appanoose County town just north of the Iowa-Missouri border. As a firefighter, Mark saw the need for better fire suppression alternatives in rural areas, especially on the farm. That led Mark to create his own ultra-high-pressure fire suppression unit and start his own company, Appanoose Manufactured Products. Now, Mark and his company are stepping into the national spotlight as semifinalists in American Farm Bureau's Ag Innovation Challenge, which culminates in Salt Lake City next weekend. For more, I'll turn it over to spokesman reporter Bob Beyond for his discussion with the founder of Appanoose Manufactured Products, Mark Mendick.
Good morning, Mark. So how about a big congratulations to you and Appanus Manufactured Products for being selected as a semifinalist in the AFBF Ag Innovation Challenge.
Yeah, and thank you very much. Farm Bureau, they do a great job of organizing the Ag Innovation Challenge, and all the competitors are extremely talented. I'm just honored to have the opportunity to put this product in front of so many influential people in the ag industry and really just represent Iowa at the end of the day.
So let's kind of start from the beginning. A little bit about you and your family, your education, and business history.
Yes, so I originally grew up in the Omaha area and knew I always wanted to be an engineer. Obviously, colleges are outrageously expensive, and in high school, I started my own lawn and landscape business to help pay for college. I was able to attend Iowa State, where I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and from there, I went to work for Case Construction as a design engineer for their dozers. During that time, I got married and moved back to my wife's hometown of Moulton, Iowa, where I started working for Weiler out of Knoxville as a design and manufacturing engineer for surface mining equipment. During my time at Weiler, my wife and I had our first child, and unfortunately there were some complications that required me to have a little bit more flexible schedule. But I was able to network with a guy out of Des Moines who owns a few larger manufacturing businesses, and he was looking for an engineer. What's really neat is the owner is a very forward-thinking businessman, and he was always encouraging me to design and develop ideas in my spare time, which kind of led into this whole business idea.
So how did Appanus Manufactured Products develop? You shared some examples about how this system could have been used locally in the field in a fire situation. I know you're a volunteer firefighter, and there were a couple of aha moments for you.
So when I moved back to Moulton, I was looking for a way to really get involved with the community, and I joined the volunteer fire department. And the fire chief knew I was an engineer, and he kind of gave me the task of trying to find products that were already out there that could utilize water more efficiently. As you guys know, in rural America, it's not like there's a city, there's not a fire hydrant in front of every house, and water management is essential. And so in my research, I came across some technology that the U.S. Air Force actually developed called ultra-high pressure. None of the companies that made these ultra-high pressure products for fire departments had exactly what we were looking for. And so I just went ahead and built a unit for our department. And lo and behold, other departments saw the skid unit that I built. It was used for grass fires. Other departments found out about it, and that was kind of the start of Appanus Manufactured Products. First year of business, I was targeting fire departments, and business seemed to be going well. But one day we actually had a fire call in our district for an old barn that had caught fire. It was way out in the country, and by the time we got there, the barn was fully engulfed in a total loss. And I just remember the face of that farmer just looking at us, and you could just see it in his eyes. And he kept telling us over and over, if you would have just been here a little bit sooner, we could have had this contained, and I wouldn't have lost everything inside the barn. And right then and there is when it hit me. I've been developing this ultra high pressure product for fire departments, but what's the point of all of this if the fire department can't even get to the location in time? So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I took this design I had developed and scaled it down and wanted to make a product that I could put into the hands of farmers and ranchers and give them a first line of defense, really, if a fire were to break out. Another thing I was really trying to focus on was making the product multifunctional. And what I mean by that is when someone sees a product that's just used for putting out fires, they may think to themselves, I've never had a fire in the last 50 years, so why should I need this product now? But because it's ultra high pressure, there are some unique features that can be used outside of firefighting.
Yeah, so tell us about the fire suppression system and how it works.
So the system consists of a water tank with a pump, a gas motor, and a hose reel. And so those three items are mounted on top of the tank. And there's also a small reservoir with a proportioning valve. So you can actually directly inject chemicals into the system, similar to like a pressure washer that might have a soap reservoir that you can directly inject soap into the system. And so the water tank that this unit is anywhere from 35 to 85 gallons and can be mounted on tractors, combines, implements, even put in the bed of your UTV or truck. And so a big part of the ultra high pressure concept is water efficiency. So each unit comes with a fire suppression nozzle, which atomizes the water into smaller droplets, up to 60 times smaller. And so this puts more water surface area into the air and absorbs the heat of the fire faster. So in simple terms, you can use less water to put out the fire. As I stated before, I wanted to make a unit that was multifunctional and could be used for day-to-day activities on the farm or ranch. And this unit runs at 1500 PSI, which is just about the same as a standard pressure washer. So we were able to actually put a quick detach fitting on the fire suppression nozzle, and you can actually swap it out for a pressure washer wand and allow it to be a portable pressure washer. As a pressure washer, that's a fire prevention measure in itself, being able to remove dirt, debris, flammable liquids. It's a great practice to clean off your equipment.
So basically, who's your target audience?
Originally, I was targeting fire departments, but this unit that I developed is best suited for water scarce areas, which could also include farmers, ranchers, commercial businesses, and even municipal airports.
And what about the cost? Is this affordable at this point?
Yeah, the unit starts in the 7,000 range, which may be sticker shock to some people, but if you're protecting a $300,000 combine, it's a pretty cheap insurance policy, especially if it's something you can use each day. I actually talked with a large Midwest ag insurance company, and they gave me some data and had the average payout at $13,500 for farm and ranch fires. And that did not even include a deductible. And they had over 135 claims a year just in fires on farms and ranches. So we believe that it's well within reason for protecting assets on your farm.
So you have some competitors out there. How does this compare and differ? What makes this system better?
Almost all the competitors out there make these ultra high pressure units that are tailored to the fire service. So they have one use and one use only, and that's for putting fires out. Our unit is multifunctional. We also have a proprietary plumbing system that actually helps increase the life of the pump. So on the farm and ranch, you're dealing with more adverse conditions, if you want to put it that way. And so you need something that is going to take a beating. Our unit was designed with that in mind.
Yeah, you've gotten some good response from your clients. What have they been saying and how they're using the product?
It's been overwhelmingly positive on both the fire side and the farm and ranch side. This unit, it can be used for so many different things. It's just amazing. We hear back from people, who use it for prescribed burns out in the plains of Nebraska. Many people are using it as a pressure washer and a standby fire unit. The proportioning system that I was talking to you about, you can put all kinds of different chemicals in there. So some people are even putting herbicides in that small proportioning tank, and they can use it as a fence line sprayer. So that they're just spraying their ditches and fence lines with it.
So another cool part of this system is that you can custom fit this for any use. Could you explain that further?
What's cool about our company is we are not like a lot of the competitors that make cookie cutter designs. They're focused on volume, and they make a one unit fits all or one size fits all. But for us, we're really focused on trying to integrate it into each individual farmer's operation. So if that means we have to design a custom tank to be able to fit it in a small nook or cranny on an implement, then we are more than willing to do that. One of the challenges that we've seen is there are just so many implements out there, so many different pieces of equipment. It takes a lot of time to try and design brackets and different mounting systems. And I think that's where some of the competition gets caught up and decides that it'd be in the best interest not to pursue those applications. And that's kind of where we've found our niche.
You'll be representing Iowa at the AFBF convention in Salt Lake City, and you're going to be presenting in front of all of your peers. What are you hoping to gain from this experience?
I think the most exciting thing is getting to network with the industry leaders and other Ag Innovation Challenge contestants. You can bounce ideas off them, see what's working and what's not. And you really get a better pulse on what priorities Farm Bureau members have across the country. And at the end of the day, it's a great opportunity to showcase our product that we have.
So as a semifinalist, you've earned a little bit of prize money, and there's additional prize money available should you advance on. What are your expansion plans, and what would you like to use any award monies for your future growth?
I have always been a firm believer in trying to uplift our community any way we can. And so one thing I'd like to do is right now we currently outsource the tank fabrication to an Iowa company out of Des Moines. I would like to bring that back into our small community of Moulton, Iowa, and be able to provide jobs for people in both fabrication and assembly. Another thing I'd like to do is develop a UHMW, a dense plastic tank. It would be lighter and more cost effective and just give customers another option when they're looking for these types of products.
Well, Mark, we wish you all the best of luck. We'll be rooting for you as you represent Iowa and Iowa Farm Bureau at the AFBF convention. If anybody would like more information about your fire suppression system, how can they reach you?
The best way is to visit us online. All of our contact information is there, but we can be reached by going to apanoosmfg.com, and MFG stands for manufacturing.
Well done, Mark. Rural Iowa needs the innovative solutions being dreamt up by bright entrepreneurs like Mark, and we're proud to shine a light on that good work. If you'd like to support Apanoose manufactured products in the Farm Bureau Ag Innovation Challenge, we'd encourage you to vote for Mark Mendick's Apanoose manufactured products for the People's Choice Award, which includes an additional $5,000 for the winner. The public voting period for that People's Choice Award will be announced next weekend, so watch for that announcement from Iowa Farm Bureau's social media accounts, which you can find down in the notes for this podcast episode, and be sure to cast your vote for Apanoose manufactured products. And while you're down in the podcast notes, please check out a few additional resources we've provided as well. That includes a link to Iowa Farm Bureau's upcoming 2024 Ag Market Outlook meeting series. From high borrowing costs to declining net farm income, the ag economy faces new challenges entering 2024. The Ag Market Outlook meeting series, led by Iowa Farm Bureau's Zach Brummer and Dr. Christopher Pudens, will focus on the impact of projected record corn ending stocks, cautious optimism in the soybean sector, and what's on the horizon in the cattle and hog markets. These regional meetings start in early February, so click the link in the notes to learn more and to get registered for the location nearest you. Another resource we've provided is a link to Iowa Farm Bureau's scholarship application for high school seniors and college students. Each year, Farm Bureau provides nearly $500,000 in scholarships to college students through the state and county levels. Our deadline for scholarship applications is January 31st, so if you know of a student who could use help with college tuition, make sure they take advantage of this last opportunity to apply for our scholarships. And finally, with the Iowa caucuses upon us today, we wanted to give you one final reminder to check out Iowa Farm Bureau's Farmers Caucus site, which includes answers to your lingering caucus questions, including how, when, and where to caucus. It also offers you some insights into where the candidates stand on the issues that matter most to agriculture. For all of that information, head out to iowafarmbureau.com/farmerscaucus or click the link in the podcast notes. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll join us for our next episode on January 29th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.